Iraq was one of the leading countries in health in the 80s. And, after all these wars, and this would be the third common cause of death after stroke and heart attack. So it's a very, very serious problem. I mean, imagine who has the brain capacity to work on that speed? Why go through the third industrial revolution and digitize while you can just jump into the future and go to AI immediately? There's an international problem, it's a global problem, that the health system everywhere has its own problem, more so maybe in the countries who are developing, but it isn't exclusive to those countries. Everywhere there is an issue with, we won't need that many hospitals in the future because
Professor Deiary Kader, lovely to have you here. I understand you've been in Iraq and had the privilege of doing a TED Talk. Tell me about it.
So I was in Baghdad. I was invited to do a TEDx talk in Arabic, which was something I haven't done at all. So I spent 30 years to learn how to do things in English, and my brain is formatted in English now. So I had to do it the other way around. So I had to, translate from English to Arabic to speak in Baghdad. But it went really well.
What's your background to take you to where you are today?
I'm a doctor. That's my day job, and trained as a surgeon, and I gradually specialized as a knee surgeon. So I do orthopedics. In addition to that, I have learned in order to enjoy even my profession, you have to diversify. So I've been doing a lot of other things. So that is from charitable work, which I have been doing for, 17 years or more so. I have our own charity. It's a medical charity. And then I worked for others, worked for International Red Cross, and I also work with Swiss Cross. So that's the charity arms that I have been interested in. In addition to that, I have been very much interested in education and writing books on education, delivering course on education, primarily medical. And then lately diversified to non-medical by establishing Life Academy. So that was completely different. We were setting up forums to discuss life. Everything that they don't teach you at school or universities. So that's what we did. Of course, I've been interested in research for many years, and I'm now the director of research at one of the hospitals in South London. Most of my research have been focused on AI in the past, I would say 18 months.
Pressed upon the point that we both have in common, which is, well, actually a few. One, a fascination with the world, and enriching experiences in life, which can be found in the most peculiar places, not just in capital city, but in, as you well know, war zones, all across the world.
I believe you've been to my hometown in Iraq.
Yeah, in Sulaymaniyah, both as a guest of you when we did the AI conference, but also understanding in part the medical response from an NGO as well. Again, seeing life.
Yeah.
And then artificial intelligence, which I think for people to truly understand how to create artificial intelligence, which is going to have an actual impact, a positive impact, and a commercial impact, and a societal impact, it should be born from a wide, diverse range of experiences, as well as obviously disciplines, but it is bigger than any one particular viewpoint. Give me some insight into your interpretation of the wider problem, which I believe you alluded upon in your TED Talk?
So in my TEDx talk, I wanted to provide some solutions to the challenging situation and the healthcare system in Iraq. So Iraq was one of the leading countries in health in the 80s. And, after all these wars, they need a complete overhaul of the system. They need to act fast because the population is growing very, very fast. So they currently 47 million people live there, and expected to double in the next 40 years. So probably they will be reaching 100 million by 2085. Yeah, so that's the prediction. The population growth is faster than here in the UK and other countries. So their health system needing an urgent attention. Doing it the conventional way probably won't be the right way to do it. So I started my TED Talk by telling them about the danger of medicine and complications of surgery and the side effects of medications that causing so many damages and deaths around the world. So there was this paper published in 2016 at British Medical Journal by Martin Makary, who is a professor of oncology at Johns Hopkins. He is being made the head of FDA. So he's a very credible person who have published a paper that describes the danger of medicine and how errors, sometimes negligence, sometimes it is just the way the system works, lead to complications that could potentially lead to death. So he was saying in this paper about 250,000 die every year in the US because of the risk of medicine. And this would be the third common cause of death after stroke and heart attack. So it's a very, very serious problem. And he was also describing that this could be underestimation of the number, because we generally, doctors, when we have complication, we try to downplay it and not report all of them as our fault. We generally blame everything else for it. It's a natural thing to do. So it isn't just in the US. In the UK, every year there's about 2 million safety alert by the NHS England, which means 10% of the people admitted to the hospital, they have some adverse event of some sort. Some of it minor, some of it is major, and the estimation is about 40,000 people die from these events. So it's a large number, and these are all underestimation, because you generally don't write the cause of death is my mistake, So it is there is a problem. There's an international problem. It's a global problem that the health system everywhere has its own problem. More so maybe in the countries are developing, but it isn't exclusive to those countries. Everywhere there is an issue with the way we deliver our healthcare, and of course the complication of what we do, the medication we use, the surgical interventions, both need to be addressed to change the system. So I was proposing that Iraq needs some smart way of thinking to deal with the health issues. Imagine the whole country have about 450 hospitals. They need twice the number to reach international standard. So in the UK, every 50,000 would have a hospital, around 50,000. We are not the best, but some countries, majority of the better countries have, one hospital for 50,000. So in Iraq, there is one hospital for 100,000 people. And the number of doctors in Iraq, they have one doctor for 1,000 individuals and patients. It should be 4 per 1,000. So they need to increase the number of doctors by 130,000. They need to build another 550 hospitals to reach the international standard. And I said that will take them 20 years probably to reach 1,000 hospitals. By the time they refurbish, renew what they have, plus the building of that many hospitals, it will take time. And the system is not slick. They're not as fast as China building a hospital within 2 days. And the other problem is, by the time you finish building all these hospitals, they will be probably out of date with the current speed of AI development. I said, why go through the third industrial revolution and digitize while you can just jump into the future and go to AI immediately? And I described that we won't need that many hospitals in the future because most of the healthcare can be delivered at home. So the hospitals will be needed primarily for surgical intervention, complicated cases, and emergencies in general. And the rest of the chronic conditions and health check can all be done remotely, like telemedicine or remote care. So people can gather data about an individual through the smartphone or the wearables, such as watches, rings, whatever they are. And then all that information can be fed to, health professionals elsewhere who can look at it with the help of AI's suggestion. And then people can be treated at home. And I also, showed them a future health booth. So you could have in any village a health booth where you have all the technology in a room that the patient could get checked, their skin, eyes, teeth, their level of anxiety, everything can be checked in that booth. And then that information will get fed to the health professionals and get dealt with without the need for us to go to the hospital. Because that many people come into the clinics and come in for theater or visiting hospitals, it's totally unnecessary, creates traffic, damage into the environment. It's time consuming. People waste hours, billions of hours wasted waiting for us to see them. And a lot of time we see them, we see that many patients. And in some clinics in Baghdad, they have to see something like 200 patients in 5 hours. I mean, imagine who has the brain capacity to work on that speed. So essentially, it's not seeing them properly. It's not seeing them clinically. It's seeing them, hello, bye-bye. So I was saying that the patient won't, gain much from that interaction, and the professionals are not happy about their professional performance by seeing somebody so fast not doing the right thing. While in the future, you would have so much information about the patient. You don't need to spend too much time with them. So all the questions you need to ask, the chatbot could ask for you. And all the information you want to know from even, their genetic makeup, their metabolic makeup, their habits, everything can be in a database. By the time the patient arrives, you could have had motion analysis looking at where is the problem, which joint is problematic, pressure place, which part of the foot is being used, facial recognition and check, see how upset they are, what is their level of anxiety, and do they have pain or not. So when the patient arrives to the doctor, maybe that initially should still happen, they probably need 1 minute of check-in and examination, 5 minutes by most, but the patient will go out with a diagnosis and a proper plan. The diagnosis probably will be made by AI, and the doctor verifies it, and the plan will be probably all written by AI, not verbal instruction, and the patient could have it digitally immediately. Mm-hmm. So everything will be different. So I was proposing that Iraq should move to the next level. They have the local expertise. They have lots of clever people in Iraq, and they have global citizens like myself abroad. And I said, I have never met an Iraqi, expert who wouldn't like to help their own country. They want to help. So they have that. They are in a very good place. And Iraq, many years ago, they used to export lots of professionals. We have teachers going to all sorts of countries around us, and even Algeria and Libya. And we had doctors, teachers, all being exported because we had more than the surplus of Iraq. So then they have expertise. There are the resources, there are financial resources. The government is pro-innovation. And most important thing is the population of Iraq is very young. So 50% of the population are below 21, while in the UK 50% are above 40. So those younger generation will be easily, converted, adapted to AI, healthcare or medical care. So they won't have any problem with it. They will get used to it very quickly.
Well, it's interesting because what you've really just described, understanding information, observing. See, we have a partnership with your SWLEOC, looking at our technology and helping solve some of the problems to make data available. You've described lots of expertise. You've described vast potentials of sources of information which are contextually relevant to an individual. So the concept of personalised healthcare, people in different places, societal impact of socioeconomic conditions and political conditions, and whether there's been conflict or not. But ultimately, you've also described that people are people. And as I think I said to you before, in Sting song, I hope the Russians love their children too. Obviously, people all across the world, we are human beings.
We have the same aspiration.
The same aspirations, but also clinically and medically, we are 99.9% recurring the same. To solve the problem, and here's an example of what we've solved in the commercial world, miles away from healthcare, but it's actually the same problem. The people tasked with protecting their workforce, which is in the tens and tens of thousands, and of their customers, which are in the millions. What is the risk to the business, the risk to employees, risk to different types of staff doing different types of functions, just like you'd get in a hospital? To assess one city, to get two people working full-time, to evaluate the risk, takes 3 months. By the time that one report is done, it's nearly 3 months out of date because all the information surrounding it is changing. But there's 3,000 locations to address each year. So if one takes 2 people 3 months and it's out of date by the time it's done, the problem to solve is common sense on scale. Now what we've done with the client is effectively have the equivalent of thousands of people conducting 84 years worth of analysis per minute, because every minute it all changes. We've looked at all the knowledge of what makes sense, and what makes sense in Tokyo is very different to Baghdad, very different to New York or Los Angeles or London or Paris. And if you look at solving the problem and you could understand all knowledge, consistently validating, let's observe constantly and say, almost like saying, how are you feeling today? But on the context that I know how you felt yesterday. And I understand your conditions. You may have had surgery, maybe you haven't. All of these things make a difference. And AI has the ability, with the right methodology, to then perform validated, understood, common sense on such an unimaginable scale, which human beings could not compete with, but can present and say, Professor Kader, your patient is coming in. These are the concerns based upon having observed her skin, her blood pressure, her behavior, her stress levels, her O2 levels, in the context of she's going to have surgery in 3 weeks' time. Mm-hmm. You know, and you've got that knowledge, but you've also got the knowledge of people who have learned things which are extremely valuable, identifying through information. And for you to be able to be subjective on, okay, why is this suggesting I should be concerned? Because a patient, the same age, same background, same blood type, same procedure coming up, the last 5 times their blood sugar level spiked, that was the outcome, and it wasn't good. What could we do about that? And go, thank you, I may not have caught that. It's just information and the ability to refine, this is a good decision, but not to have vast human resources or misallocate extremely valuable resources to do menial tasks.
So you've talked about personalized healthcare. So currently what we do, we will prescribe something or recommend something based on research, of course, and that research have looked at averages, right? It looked like, this medication 80% of the people would respond to, and you will do this. That procedure will be successful in 80% or 90% of the time. But in the future, it will be and should be personalized. How? By knowing more about that patient. So, as you said, we don't know enough about people. So there are times that, a rheumatologist, they will prescribe a medication to a patient for 2 to 3 months, and then they realize that patient is not responding to that. Or, people who have cancer, they might get some sort of chemotherapy for a period of time, and then they don't respond to it. So in the future, near future, we'll be able to tell who's going to respond to what, instead of wasting 3 months or maybe longer and subject people to that torture of whatever medication is there, then immediately becomes personalized. Or even painkillers, like you might respond very well to paracetamol, somebody else will to brufen, or various medications would have different effect on different people, but we don't know it. We do a trial and error currently. So the way we practice medicine is very, very generalistic. It's based on averages. It's far from being personalized, and it's a bit of kind of a trial and error. It should not be like that. No. So that's why what you say, it is personalization, and the data is very, very important. We should know more about people before we treat them, and I should have a lot of data in front of me before I make a decision. Sometimes we just don't have enough information. We can't even find the notes sometimes from a year ago or 2 years ago, or even last week in this current NHS hospital. So then you make a decision on what the patient tells you, whatever your memory serves you with. So then you will end up making a decision. Cannot be the right decision. It's not a complete one.
In my mind, and the way that we look at it from a technology perspective, how many data points can we observe where it gives us confidence that the outcome, and again, I always talk about geotemporal, temporal time. Time is the one thing that you can get a better picture when you can see it consistently. Again, it's the idea of white coat syndrome, high blood pressure because you're freaked out because you're in front of a doctor. Doesn't mean you have it all the time. The truth is subjective in a moment, but over a period of time, and whilst at different places, to describe things with time in consideration and place in consideration, and see that from as many different perspectives as possible, then you have more and more confidence. And that could be anything. What's the optimal conditions to exercise? What's the optimal conditions to undertake surgery? correlate and understand what it is that we're seeing and what is unique about this and unique about that. It's all there, but we refuse to look, or we don't have time to look, or we don't have the capacity to look, or capability. With technology underlying and applying artificial intelligence to perform the scale element, could have incredibly powerful outcomes on an individual level and a general level. The application of medical research. If you discover new things, surely that discovery should enrich the decision-making process because there is more facts available and more knowledge.
Yeah, but it doesn't work like that, though. I mean, it is anything which is being described today, any innovation, takes 15 to 20 years to come into practice.
Right.
So the things, that it's a common practice now, it's been talked about 20 years ago. So it takes a long time to apply or for something to become a common knowledge. It isn't that fast. The biggest problem we have, the one you described, is the velocity of the information that's coming in. And hopefully, with the system that we are trying to develop, where you have all the data aggregated in one place, then you can deal with big data in a better way, where you can incorporate the new information into the current knowledge and make some use of it. Because we're doing trials now. The trial has been going on for example, for 2 years, and when it stops, any new information won't be, part of that. So it is, it has a time limit. While, with the way we're trying to do things with the AI, any new information will be incorporated to the system, and maybe one patient added last night to the system, it may change, the number of a particular condition, and then it have a slightly, different outcome if you have more patient in that, in that group. So the information will be added live, and then will be useful to us in daily life very quickly.
Continuous learning.
It isn't about something happened 20 years ago. It's about, the information being accumulated, and added to, and then being utilized, as quickly as possible.
And in context. I think context it's a real challenge, whether it's corporate world, where you have different business units, so operations, sales, risk and resilience, supply chain, with a level of complete independence where knowledge isn't really so much transferred. That means as new information comes into play, the context is very granular and linear, and in many ways it has to be, in the sense of one department, or let's say this is information in the context of radiology, but how about operator theatre booking management? How about a different particular sector? How about from a GP's perspective? There is a wider context of, for example, a health pathway. So new information comes in to me. What's my health condition? To you, what's your health condition? The same information could have two different contexts, little simple bits, and to observe it all, but in real time provide context and go, okay, this one piece of information affects 10 functional units, individuals, roles completely differently, and that subsequent change affects each other's in turn.
Yeah. So that's what we're hoping to solve with the geotemporal model that you have, the big data we have with the volume and the velocity, the veracity of it. So all that would be analyzed live and being utilized and put into context.